All right, welcome back, everybody. We're diving deep today, and it's something a lot of you have been asking about, the whole connection between, extreme wealth and poverty. We've got a ton of your notes and articles here, so
Yeah, it's a
let's see what we can figure out.
pretty complex issue, lots of moving parts. But one
Mhm.
thing that just jumps out from all this stuff you sent is the difference in tax rates, like between billionaires and just, regular workers.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's not even just a difference, it's like a huge gap. One of these articles said the top 25 richest Americans, their tax rate was only 3.4% between 2014 and 2018. And then, during those same years, the average person was paying 13%. How does that even work?
Well, it really comes down to how the tax system is set up. Billionaires, they make most of their money from investments, right? And those are taxed way lower than like salaries and wages. We're talking, capital gains and dividends. Those are usually around 20% compared to, the higher brackets you hit when it's just your income. But then it gets even more complicated than that. There's all these like loopholes and strategies they can use to bring their taxes down even more.
So they're paying even less than that 20%.
Yeah, they can, like
Yeah.
charitable donations, setting up trusts, even moving money offshore, stuff like that.
So basically, the system is rigged for people who are already super rich. It's
Yeah.
hard to even think about. Like
Yeah.
Warren Buffett, he was paying 0.1% in taxes, while everyone else is just trying to, get by.
Yeah, it's a real problem. I mean, it gets worse when you think about all the money the government's missing out on. If billionaires were paying their fair share, that could be used to help people who are struggling, fund programs.
Didn't one of the sources have an idea about that? Something about wealth tax?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. One article proposed this thing, a 5% annual tax, but only on multi-millionaires and billionaires. And they estimated it could bring in like $1.7 trillion per year.
Wow.
Enough to lift, get this, 2 billion people out of poverty. It's a big what if, of course.
Yeah,
But still, it makes you think, what could be done?
absolutely. Like, imagine if even just some of that money
Right.
was put into things like the earned income tax credit.
Right, the EITC.
Yeah.
That program is designed to help people who are working, low to moderate income, families too. It basically gives them a tax break.
Yeah.
Which can mean, they owe less taxes or even get a refund.
Makes a big difference for them.
Oh yeah, huge.
Yeah.
Studies have shown it's really effective at like getting kids out of poverty.
That's great. But I mean, I have a feeling it's not that easy. These sources also talked about how corporations are part of this whole thing, too. It's not just individual billionaires. It's the way companies operate that can make poverty worse.
Oh, absolutely. Corporate greed. That phrase comes up a lot. And there's some pretty clear examples like fast food places, McDonald's, Chipotle. They've been raising prices way faster than inflation. Some things are like 20% higher than they were just 2 years ago.
Really? 20%?
Yeah. And it's not just them. It's happening all over.
I've definitely noticed, the packages are smaller, but the price is the same. Isn't there a word for that?
Shrinkflation.
Yeah, shrinkflation.
That's exactly what it is. It's sneaky because you don't always notice.
Right.
But it adds up, especially for families who are already struggling.
Yeah, for sure. It feels like it hits the people who can least afford it the hardest.
Absolutely. And then there's the whole thing about CEO pay versus like what regular workers make. The gap there is insane. One article said CEO pay has gone up almost 1,500%
Mm-hmm.
over the past 43 years, while worker pay has basically stayed the same.
Wow, 1,500%. It's like two different worlds. So we've got billionaires not paying much in taxes, and corporations doing all these things to make more profit, even if it means their workers and customers suffer. Is there any hope?
Well, it's not a great picture, but these sources do have some ideas for solutions. It's not about hating on corporations or billionaires, It's about making the system work for everyone.
Okay, so let's talk about those solutions. What kind of things could actually make a difference?
Yeah, we can get into that. We can dive into that. Yeah, so picking up where we left off, these sources, they've got some ideas about how to fix things, address these issues.
Okay, yeah, I'm ready. It seems like we found some pretty big problems. I'm curious what the solutions could even look like.
Well, a big one is tax reform, basically making the system more progressive. So billionaires and big corporations, they'd be paying more, since they have so much wealth and income.
Right. Okay. But how would that actually work? We talked about closing loopholes and raising taxes on investments, maybe even that wealth tax. Is there anything else?
Yeah, there are some other ideas floating around. Like some economists say we should have a minimum tax just for billionaires. So no matter what deductions they use, they still pay a certain percentage. And another idea is raising the corporate tax rate, the one for companies. That's been going down for years.
Interesting. So all this would bring in more money for the government. But how do we make sure it actually goes towards helping people escape poverty?
That's the key, right?
Uh,
It's not enough to just collect more taxes. The sources talk a lot about how that money needs to be invested in programs that really make a difference.
like what?
Well, like we were saying, the EITC is a good one, but also things like affordable housing, making sure everyone can get a good education, job training programs, stuff like that.
So it's like two sides of the same coin. Get more money from those who can afford it, and then use that money to create opportunities for everyone else. But what about corporations themselves? It feels like they have so much power in all this.
Oh, they definitely do. And changing how corporations act, that's a big part of the solution too. The sources mention things like stronger labor laws, raising the minimum wage, and making it easier for workers to form unions.
Right, so it's not just about government policies, it's about giving workers more power to fight for fair pay and benefits.
Exactly. If people can earn a living wage, that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I can see that. But is it really possible to, regulate corporate greed? It feels like that's just how the system works, you know?
It's a tough one, for sure. But the sources argue that regulations can help. Like, remember shrinkflation?
Uh-huh.
Well, maybe we need stronger consumer protection laws to stop that. And then there's antitrust laws. Those are meant to break up monopolies.
What are those again?
Monopolies are when one company controls, like, the whole market for something.
Oh, right.
So antitrust laws can help create more competition.
So prices would be better for consumers.
Exactly. And it's fairer for smaller businesses, too. But we can't forget about the human side of all this. We were talking about privatization before, like with healthcare and prisons. How does that play into all this poverty and inequality?
Yeah, good point.
When you have essential services being run for profit, well, it doesn't always work out so well for people who are already struggling. Like the sources mention this trend with private prisons. They actually lobby for harsher laws, so more people go to jail.
Seriously. So they make more money.
Yeah, it's messed up.
Wow. And what about healthcare? You said privatization can make it harder for low-income people to get care.
Yeah, there's research showing that when hospitals are privatized, they tend to have fewer patients who are on Medicaid.
So the people who need help the most are getting left behind.
Pretty much. It creates this two-tier system. People with money get better care, and everyone else is just struggling to get their basic needs met.
It feels like this never-ending cycle, corporations making money off systems that keep people trapped in poverty.
Yeah, it's a lot.
But I'm hoping the sources have some good news too.
They do. They do. They talk a lot about how important individual actions are. Alongside, the big systemic changes we've been talking about, we all have a role to play of making things fair.
Okay, I'm listening. What can we actually do? Because sometimes it feels like, what difference can one person make?
Well, first of all, just understanding this stuff, that's huge. The more we all know about these issues, the better we can fight for change.
So, talking to people about it.
Exactly. Share what you've learned, challenge people who don't take this stuff seriously.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. But what about more concrete actions? Things we can do every day.
Oh, there's definitely stuff you can do. Like, think about where you spend your money.
Right.
Supporting businesses that treat their workers well, that are good for the environment, that sends a message.
So, boycotting the bad ones.
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
Every dollar you spend is like a vote for the kind of world you want.
I like that. Makes you think twice about where your money's going.
Right. And don't forget about your voice. Literally. Contact your elected officials, go to town hall meetings, let them know you care about these issues. Demand policies that make things more just and equitable.
Right, so hold them accountable.
Yeah.
It's been a lot, this deep dive. We've gone from taxes to corporations to healthcare and prisons, and it feels like we've only just touched the surface.
We have. But that's what a deep dive is all about, right? It's about sparking that curiosity, making you want to learn more.
Definitely. I think what's really hitting me is how connected everything is. It's not just about wealth and poverty, It's about how those things are tied to climate change and social justice and even politics.
You got it. That's why it's so important to think about all this stuff systemically. You can't just change one thing and expect it to fix everything. It's all interconnected.
So what now? We've talked about some solutions, both big and small, but it's still kind of overwhelming. What's the one thing you hope people listening take away from all this?
I guess I'd say, remember that things don't have to be this way. This whole situation with extreme wealth and poverty, it's a result of choices. Choices we make, policies we put in place, systems we keep going, and that means we can change it.
We have the power.
Yeah. We're not just stuck with this.
That's actually really encouraging.
Right.
We're not just bystanders, we're part of it all.
Exactly. Even small actions can add up,
Yep.
especially when lots of people are doing them, like those consumer choices we talked about. Imagine if everyone started thinking about that with every purchase.
Yeah, like a ripple effect.
That's it. Individual actions building into something bigger.
That makes a lot of sense. And that thing about wealth inequality and climate change, that's really stuck with me.
It's a big one, and it doesn't get talked about enough.
Yeah.
The sources you sent, they made a strong case. The people who benefit most from this system, they're also the ones driving the climate crisis. And who's going to suffer the most from that?
The people who are already struggling.
Exactly. It's like a double injustice.
It feels like we have to address both at the same time. You can't talk about social justice without talking about climate justice.
You got it. They're two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
And that brings me to something I want to leave everyone with. The sources we looked at, they show how billionaires and corporations are already shaping the future, often in ways that put profit ahead of people and the planet. So the question is, what kind of future do we want? What role are we going to play in making it happen?
Wow, that's a big question. This whole deep dive has been, well, eye-opening. We've learned about some hard stuff, but also some hopeful stuff. I hope everyone listening feels like they can actually make a difference.
Me too. It's been great going through these sources with you. It's awesome that you're taking the time to learn about all this. Keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep fighting for a better world.
Thanks for being here. And everyone listening, we hope you'll keep exploring these issues too, and find your own ways to make a difference. Until next time, keep diving deep.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about, right? We went from taxes, then to how companies work, even healthcare and prisons. It's like everything's connected.
It is, and that's what's hitting me the most, I think, just how interconnected all this stuff really is. It's not just, oh, rich people and poor people, separate issues, It all ties into climate change, social justice, even politics. It feels like you can't pull one thread without the whole thing unraveling.
Exactly, and that's why we've got to look at it as a system, the whole picture. It doesn't work to just change one tiny thing and hope it'll fix everything.
So what now? We've talked about what could be done, both by governments and individuals, but it still feels kind of overwhelming.
Yeah.
What's the one thing you'd want someone listening to walk away with? What should they remember?
That's a good question. I think the most important thing is this isn't just how it has to be. All this stuff, extreme wealth and poverty, it's happening because of choices people made. The policies we have, the systems we keep using,
So we're not stuck with it.
Nope. And that means we can change it.
That's actually really good to hear, I gotta say.
Right.
It's easy to feel helpless, but we're not just bystanders. We're part of this whole thing.
Exactly. And even if it's a small action, it matters. Especially when you think about millions of people making those same choices. Remember we talked about where you buy things, what companies you support.
Yeah.
If everyone was doing that, it would make a big difference.
Like a ripple effect.
Exactly. One person's actions spreading out.
That makes a lot of sense. And that connection to climate change, that's really been on my mind.
It's a big deal, and people need to talk about it more. The stuff you sent over, it was pretty clear. The folks who are benefiting the most from how things are now, they're also the ones driving the climate crisis.
And then it's the people who are already struggling who get hit the worst.
Exactly. It's not right.
It's like we got to fix both problems together. Social justice, any climate justice.
They're two sides of the same coin, for sure. And that kind of leads to what I wanted to leave everyone with. All these sources, they showed how billionaires and corporations, they're already making decisions that shape the future. A lot of times, those decisions are about profit, not people or the planet. So it makes you wonder, what kind of future do we want? Are we going to let them decide, or are we going to play a role in making it happen?
Wow, that's a lot to think about. This whole deep dive has been really eye-opening, gotta say. We've learned some tough things, but also some hopeful things. More than anything, I hope people listening feel empowered, like they can actually do something.
Me too.
Yeah.
It's been great talking about this with you, seriously. It's awesome that you're digging into all this, wanting to learn. Keep it up, keep asking questions, and keep fighting for a better world.
I will. Thanks for helping guide us through this. And to everyone listening, keep exploring this stuff, find what matters to you, and make a difference. Until next time, keep diving deep.